Hello, my name is Heather Peterson, and I will be teaching you about Chapter 8, Radio and Digital Audio, which is a topic that's very close to my heart because I grew up in newsrooms. My dad was in radio, and then I've worked these past 4 years in radio as well, so I'm very excited to kind of go through the history and explore this chapter with you. So if you'll just go to that first slide. We'll just start with the phonograph, which was created by Thomas Edison in 1877, and it was the first ever audio recording device. And of course, it wasn't up to today's standards. Once something was recorded, it continued to deteriorate every single time that it was played. So it wasn't a very long-lasting solution, but it was a good start, and you can see a photo of it there on your slide. And a fun fact, the first ever recorded piece of audio was Mary Had a Little Lamb. So that's kind of fun. Next slide. If we're just going to go through the timeline of audio's early development, right after Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, there were some other developments in the audio world, but Nikola Tesla was actually the first to give a very public demonstration of radio, so he's kind of credited as really the brains behind the operation in creating radio. Fast forward to 1906, we had the first ever transmission of sound over the airwaves. It was actually delivered to some sailors who were off the coast of Massachusetts on Christmas Eve, and they were told to tune in at a certain time on Christmas Eve, and they were able to hear a violinist play "Oh Holy Night" and a Bible passage on Christmas Eve. So I'm sure that was a really special thing and a really marked moment in audio's history. So fast forward again to the 1920s, radios continued to develop. They've continued to utilize that transmission technology, and by 1920, WWJ in Detroit became the first all-news radio station in the country, and it kind of sparked a lot more radio stations to pop up. So by the 1930s, radio popularity had surged, and the amount of stations had jumped from 34 to 378 in just 4 years. And by that time, 80% of Americans now had radios in their own homes. So it became kind of a cultural phenomenon because people could experience entertainment in their home. They could get the news, like I mentioned. They could get dramas, comedies, big sporting events, and they could listen to it as a family in their own home or invite friends over, and it really was a community feel. So that was a really exciting time. But then television came on the scene and kind of took over some of those roles, those dramas, comedies, stuff like that. Those became TV shows because people preferred to watch it versus listen to it. So TV grew, but radio had to kind of find its own new niche, and so they started turning to playing music and really fostering that music culture. So the radio DJ was born, and the top 40 format kind of became really popular at that time. Next slide. Then to keep up, they kind of had to go on a hunt for better audio quality because it was pretty crackly at that time. It was just not the best, and so by the 1960s to 70s, people were tuning more to FM, and that had that stereo sound, that better audio quality that people were looking for. By 1982, digital audio had emerged, but it was only in the audio recording world, not broadcasting world, and that was just with the introduction with CDs or compact discs. And those became mainstream in the 80s and 90s, and those were really marketed as something that was just unbreakable, whereas a cassette tape, if you left in the car, it might melt, the tape might become destroyed as you're pulling it out of your car radio, but CDs, they were marketed as unbreakable, and of course, you could snap one, but for the most part, they weren't as easily damaged because it was, well, you'll see, we'll get to that slide, hold up. Next slide. Anyway, as that CD world kind of was happening, digital broadcasting was still lagging behind because even after the CDs were introduced, radio took decades to figure out how to switch from analog to digital radio because the costs were just too high to make it worth it. I mean, in 1983, a megabyte of storage cost $319, and that would only hold a fourth of a song. So that, of course, was just not cost efficient for most businesses to even try to figure out how to work that. The size of the files had to be decreased and the bandwidth had to be increased for it to be financially conceivable for businesses to do. Next slide. And like I was kind of mentioning before, the difference between analog and digital is that analog is a sound wave recorded or used in its original form. It's taken directly from the microphone and laid onto the tape. It's very physical information, so it reads it directly, and that wave is read, amplified, and sent to a speaker to produce sound. Whereas digital, it takes that analog wave and it just takes samples of it and changes it into binary code. It's a series of zeros and ones. It's just like basically an algorithm. It takes a certain amount of samples per song or whatever, and it just approximates that original analog wave. But again, those files were just pretty big. So compression comes on the scene, and that's the shrinking of audio files into a more manageable size. That got us things like MP3s, which you'll see today, that the compressed audio to about 1/10 the size without perceptibly changing the quality of the sound. But again, that was just for audio recording, not for broadcasting. So broadcasting was still struggling to figure out how to do that. Then we come to digital radio, finally. In the 1990s, European broadcasters developed the Eureka system, or an MP2, as they sometimes called it, and that was an attempt at digital broadcasting, but the National Association of Broadcasters in America didn't exactly adopt that. They went in favor of something called Ubiquity's in-band on-channel, or IBOC. That eventually won them over, and they went with that because of its higher audio quality and lower bit rates than their Eureka system. And just next slide, we'll explain kind of what that is. That digital radio technology, it layers the digital and analog signals together so that you're kind of getting the marrying of both worlds. And then the Ubiquity company, they ended up coming up with an HD radio technology, hybrid digital. And that would allow broadcasters to keep their assigned frequencies. So if they were 101.5, they could continue to be 101.5 even though they were now using a digital signal. They could also transmit metadata. That includes what you would think of, you know, the 101.5, the name of the station, the name of the song, the name of the artist, all that you would now see in car radios today. It could also broadcast things like news, sports, weather, traffic, emergency alerts right to your radio, and it could split that signal into multiple digital channels. So sometimes you'll see today 101.51, 101.52, 3, and they could have different formats on each of those splits of the digital channel. So that was really exciting for broadcasters, but it was also an exciting thing for consumers because they could experience higher quality audio, of course, and you can tag music you want to purchase for later. If you see a song you like, you can save it, look it up later, purchase it later. It's kind of exciting. But as this was all going on for, you know, your car radios, there was also obviously the surge of internet radio. And we have two types of services with the internet radio. Of course, you have your on-demand, which is kind of like Spotify, where you kind of get to pick a song or an artist and compile playlists of your own choosings, and you can even download that later. It's a little bit more you have a little bit more control over what you're listening to, and you can listen to it offline, like I said. And then there's the live streaming apps, kind of like Pandora, where you kind of choose a genre or a, you know, artist, and it takes that algorithm, it takes your likes and dislikes and kind of frames a radio station for you, but you don't have quite as much control. That's just kind of two methods of internet radio that really started to surge. Next slide. Also, in this kind of era, satellite radio kind of is emerging as well. Satellite technology, it delivers the programming using a satellite, and so that means that no matter where you are in America, you're getting your same radio stations. It doesn't change when you go from one zone to the other. It doesn't change the quality because it's coming from satellite, not from, you know, your nearest radio tower. And that was really exciting for a lot of people. You may know Sirius XM. It's the most famous satellite radio, and that was kind of the marrying of Sirius and XM in 2001. And they've seen a slow but really steady growth, as you can see from the chart in your slide. In 2006, they only had about 6 million subscribers, and now, just of last year, they're getting close to 34 million subscribers. And like I said, it's subscribers, so people had to pay into that service. You pay for the technology, and then you're paying a monthly service. Of course, cars today, a lot of times, automatically has the technology programmed into it already, and you just need to activate the subscription. But again, it's just it's slowly growing, and it's exciting for certain businesses to take advantage of. Next slide. Podcasting is another way to get audio that's an entertainment for people these days, and it's digital audio recordings that are usually episodic or themed. And you can download these, and you can have it on your computer, your cell phone, anything like that. And what's really exciting about this is because, yes, you do have podcasters who are creating their own original content for podcasts, but you also have traditional radio broadcasters taking their normal morning drive and putting that on a podcast, so that if you missed it that day, you were homesick, or just didn't go to work that day as a holiday, I don't know what the reason would be, but if you missed the program that you would have wanted to hear, you can now download that podcast and take it with you and listen to it whenever you want. And a really popular one is NPR. They have a lot of different shows, and they are able to kind of market those shows individually as podcasts and really get you to experience it when you want, where you want. And that's been a major driving factor for consumers. And if you'll look at the chart in your slideshow, you'll see that just like a lot of the other audio things that we've just talked about, they're slowly progressing. More and more people are listening to podcasts every year. Now, in the past year, 44% of Americans have now listened to a podcast, and 26% of Americans are listening every month. So it is a growing method for people. Our book talks about some things to watch out for in the audio world as we continue to progress. And one of the things it says to watch out for is FM radio in smartphones, and that's because most smartphones are equipped with an FM chip. And it's already in your phone, it just needs to be activated. And the thing is this, if you were getting your FM radio through that chip instead of through your internet streaming services, then you'd be using less battery, and you wouldn't be using as much phone data like those internet streaming services. So, and it also could be crucial for emergency situations, because if cell towers go down, if there's no internet, no data in sight, you can still get that FM signal to your phone to receive emergency notifications, and that could be crucial in fires, earthquakes, tornadoes, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, like I said, most phones have these chips inside them, and a lot of them are activating them. It's just kind of begun, this whole phenomenon. Samsung, Sprint, LG, they've activated their FM chips. Apple, however, they say that most of their new iPhones don't actually contain these FM capabilities, and that's been a huge hindrance, because Next Radio is a company that's been leading this charge and wanting to utilize this FM radio service on people's phones, but they haven't really been able to do that because Apple, which is of course one of the biggest providers of smartphones, has not been on board. So it's hard to gain popularity if you don't have Apple on your side. So as of this past month, a majority of the employees of Next Radio were actually let go. So we might have to wait a little bit longer to see this FM chip technology truly utilized. Next slide. Social media and video, of course, is a big deal. We know this, in every context of our lives, but it's true for radio too. And I just want to pause here for a second, let you not pause, but camp out here, because I was actually a digital news reporter at my radio station, and so this is very close to my heart. And if you have time to look at your slideshow, there's a video of me delivering a report the day that Facebook Live premiered, January 29th, 2016. And I was kind of explaining to our listeners on the radio and on Facebook Live what Facebook Live is. And give me a little grace, it's not the best quality, but again, it was day one, so we hadn't kind of mastered how to frame shots and how to really utilize it. But what's really exciting about this technology and social media and video in general is that it allows radio personalities to connect with their listeners in a totally different way, in a new and engaging way. And again, growing up in radio, I've always heard that the reason that radio has continued to thrive for so long is because when you're driving home from work after a long day, you get your familiar radio anchor, you get your familiar radio DJ, and it's like they're sitting in the car next to you because, you have conversations about current events and the music of the day and all this stuff. So like your radio personality should feel like your best friend. And of course, you're gonna see your best friend on social media, right? Like that's how you engage, that's how you talk back. And so social media and video have really allowed radio stations to connect with their listeners on a deeper level and receive feedback, receive conversation starters, and it's been just a really exciting thing to see. So of course the social media world is kind of growing and changing on a daily basis, so definitely watch out for that, but I'm really excited about it. So how do we take this and apply it biblically? If you'll look at your next slide, you'll see it's good for us to connect with people and meet together. Hebrews 10:24 through 25 says, "And let us consider how to stir up one another in love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." And I just want to point out that connecting with people and meeting together is a biblical concept, and there's stations like K-Love and Air One, and they do this. They create this radio atmosphere where they share people's stories, they hear people's stories online, and it's just this community of love and encouraging one another. And this is just a way that radio can be utilized to build each other up and just further God's kingdom. Another biblical application, again, because I have a news talk background, but we would be foolish not to reach out to others of different opinions and try to dialogue with them. Proverbs 18:2 says, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion." And coming from news talk, there's lots of different opinions. There's lots going on in a very divisive political world these days, and it's important to not only spurt our opinions, but hear others and engage with them and try to have those dialogues. And so the way radio is going today with social media and how it is becoming more and more engaging, I think that this is a way that we can use radio to have those conversations, start those conversations, and try to understand one another. So I just want to pose the question, is radio dead? Because when TV came out, in the 1940s, when it was surging in popularity, people said, that's it, radio's done for. TV is taking radio's spot. But nowadays, radio's still here, and there's even more rival mediums, and it's still here. So what do you think? Can it still compete? I want to hear your thoughts, but my thought is that no, it's still very much alive, and it's progressing. It's just maybe not as quickly as maybe we would have thought. But let me just throw some statistics at you. On the next slide, you'll see a chart from the Nielsen Company, and they track ratings and stuff. And they show that AM and FM radio still has the most consumers out of any medium. They have 228.5 million people listening every single week. And the other mediums, yes, they're doing well, but no one can reach people like AM and FM radio because no one else can reach you in your car that way. Yes, you can use your smartphone to listen to internet radio, but again, that's still radio. So radio, audio, that's still winning. And I think that because no other medium can meet you where you're at like that, and I used to commute 2 hours every day, so like that's 2 hours that radio gets me that no other medium can, and I think that that's put radio in a unique position to continue to grow and thrive no matter what else happens. On the next slide, You can see just the breakdown of audio in 2018. AM FM radio, like I said, you just can't beat it. It's free entertainment on your drive. But there's also streaming audio, so your internet radios. So people who don't mind using their data in the car, they can do that. And then satellite radio and podcasts. And 75% of listening happens outside of the home. And so even when you're streaming internet radio, that's still happening in cars a lot of times. That's kind of the point of that statistic. On the next slide, you'll see kind of the takeaways for businesses, and kind of like I mentioned, radio allows advertisers and businesses to reach more consumers than any other medium. Like I said, you just can't beat it. It's free entertainment in your car, no matter where you're at. No other medium can do that. Another takeaway for business would just be not to neglect or stereotype certain age groups. As you can see from that chart, again from the Nielsen company, you can see that AM/FM radio is still winning, but a lot of people have said that millennials, the younger generations, aren't listening to radio like the older generations have, and that you can just see that that's not true. Like, they are right up there with the 50 plus demographic. So we need to include them in our conversations about radio to continue thriving as businesses. And then finally, just cost rules consumers' decision making as well as businesses. Again, like I said, you just can't beat AM/FM radio because it's free entertainment. If you have a car, which most people in America do these days, you are going to get free entertainment in your car. Versus a TV, you have to buy the TV, you have to buy cable or Netflix or whatever else, whatever kind of entertainment you want. Most podcasts are free. Most Pandora, you can pay for Spotify or Pandora like subscription services, but you can still get free entertainment, and that beats out a lot of the other mediums and a lot of other programs. So that's the reason radio has continued to succeed, to be honest. And that's really all I have for you today, just some thoughts of why I think radio is still alive and thriving, and why I think it will continue to thrive as long as it continues to connect with people and find new ways to reach people where they're at. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the discussion board, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to Chapter 8, and we hope you have a good day.